Okay, see if we have our green light from our, got the thumbs up from the broadcast room in the back, so we're back in session. Recess over. We've got Chief Bliven from the Police Department with us for the Police Department's capital project request, and we'll turn it over to him to walk us through their proposal. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about our CIP requests. And really, we have one request for the 2022 budget, and that is for fencing of our parking lot. We do have in our 5-year plan a range request, and that's a request that's been in the CIP, future CIP request for a number of years. And I can talk about that if you want to, but we didn't actually request any money in this year's CIP for that, for the range. But so let me know if you want me to talk about that. I'm just going to talk about the fencing.
Let's go over the fencing, and then you can touch on that just for future planning so that we have, at least a introduction to what that would look like over the next couple of years for that range.
You bet. That sounds good. So over the last several years, there's been an increasing need for security within the parking lot of the police department. And so that's where this item comes from. We have had a lot of things, and I put this right in the CIP request, that have happened within our parking lot over the last 5 years that I think rises to the level of us putting up fencing within our parking lot. Really, first and foremost, we had a number of years ago, the parking lot got redesigned, and they put up a decorative steel fence on the north side of our parking lot, and that's really in disrepair. It's starting to fall over in places, and so we do need to replace that fence fairly soon, and that's maybe, it stands not quite as tall as these podiums do, and there's flowers that get planted in the center of that, but as a result of plow operations and snow and salt, it's really starting to look bad and not even be functional anymore. So that's first and foremost, is that we have a need on the north side of the parking lot for that replacement. But moreover than that, we have a number of issues that have occurred within our police parking lot over the last several years. If you would ask our police officers what is the most important need that we have in our facility, it would be we need to secure the parking lot. They have concerns over their safety, the safety of citizens, and that kind of thing. We have a lot of citizens that, they're riding bike, they're running, they're walking, either going to or from someplace to the bus stop, or they're just exercising and they cut through the parking lot. And so we have all of our marked squads and our unmarked squads in that parking lot. And when they get an emergency call, they leave quickly. So that, they really have to be very conscientious about people that are just cutting through the parking lot to make sure that there's not a liability issue, that there's not an accident within that parking lot. So that's an issue that we have. I think the larger issue is just around the safety. We have our undercover vehicles that are in that parking lot. We have people that are known drug dealers that are going through the parking lot videotaping all of our unmarked squads and our personal vehicles. We have police officers who make sure on their way home that they're not being followed, that kind of thing, because people are videotaping their personal vehicles in the parking lots. And so we've had a number of incidents in the parking lot over the last several years where people they show up by the employee entrance, which is on the north side of the building, and they start demanding personal addresses. They start yelling, anti-law enforcement sentiments, and we've arrested a number of people in the parking lot as a result of that. We've had officers assaulted in incidents that have occurred in the employee parking lot. Another issue is at the beginning of every shift, officers do a squad check, and so the squads are parked in the parking lot, and part of that squad check is they have to assure the functioning of their rifle, the firearm that's in the squad. So every shift they pull it out and they check it, make sure it's functioning, and then they put it back in the squad. And citizens walk up on police officers as they're checking out their rifles in the parking lot, which is, it's not necessarily unsafe, but it's concerning to the police officers because they're in the middle of checking out their equipment, and citizens are walking up on them. And sometimes citizens are surprised and they're concerned and scared, frankly, because the officers have the rifle in their hands. So securing that parking lot with a fence would fix that issue. Really, that's the short and sweet of why we're asking for that parking lot to be secured. We did get some just really preliminary pricing. We think $75,000 would cover a fence. We're not looking to put up a chain link fence. We want something that's relatively decorative but also secure, maybe wrought iron, something like
Or
that.
vinyl fencing, or,
Yeah, I mean, if the CIP request is approved, we would go through a process of determining what exactly that would look like and what it would be. But we got pricing on wrought iron fencing. That was the thing that was recommended to us because we would need a gate that would open and close for squad cars and to be able to pull out of
I think
there
there's some
quickly.
benefit also to being able to see through,
There
right?
is.
I mean,
Yeah, you
because
don't
if
want
you're,
it to look like a,
well, but if your view is
fortress or a
completely
bunker.
blocked, because you want to see what's going on also near you on the sidewalks and whatever, assuming this is the west side, the north side, and part of the east side where the driveway's not, is it the whole thing?
That's right. It'd be every side except for the building. So it'd be the north side where that current steel fencing is, and
Yep.
then the east and west sides as well. Yeah.
Okay.
And then there would be, we would have a pedestrian gate on the west side of the parking lot, and then a mechanical gate that would be opened with a key card access on the east side, and then probably a secondary vehicle access that would be manual. Is what our plan would be.
So then would there be gate access at the driveway as well? So then, you know, where do you park the public when they come?
Yeah, we would still have to have a public parking lot, so we would still have that public parking lot
So
access.
okay, so the spaces that you have along the east side would
Correct.
be for the public?
Absolutely.
Everything else would be gated?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Questions about the fencing project?
Yeah, I'll start.
Go ahead, Mike.
So,
Yep.
Yeah, I guess because this department kind of lies in my district, I'll kind of ask these first. And I'm glad you kind of touched on the aesthetics of fencing. And I think that's going to be a very important consideration when something, if something goes up around the department, because I don't want it to look like well, I know you want a secure area, but I don't want it to look too much like a secure, like something
Fortress?
fortress where, yeah, where you don't want people, looking in, but I understand, the importance of how to minimize those interactions. So I'm good to hear that the aesthetics are an important consideration. The other part, I guess, it would be with the, and I know Lisa talked about this, the parking on the east side, for the public, because there's not a whole lot of space there, especially if there's a meeting in the neighborhood, in the community room there. So, and there's also those two spaces around the corner that you use for, the
Safe exchange.
The safe exchange area, yeah, the meeting place. So, I guess those would be my only concerns or considerations in the fencing would be the aesthetics and, how it's gonna also, the public interaction will be, when they come to either visit the department or the community room there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the aesthetics are important. And in regards to public access to the parking lot, the vast majority of people that come to the police department for some type of business park in that east parking lot or on the street. There are some that park in the employee parking lot, but very few. So, and it would be our intent to try to maintain the safe exchange.
Yeah,
That's-
because I think
that's
there's
been a
only,
good thing.
yeah, 'cause I think there's only like 5 spaces there, and 2 of them are
Yeah.
handicaps already.
Right.
So it's
Yep.
it's a pretty tight little lot.
That means when we come to visit, we're going to have to park in the street down there, I guess.
And frankly,
Yeah.
I mean, the parking lot is at capacity. It's much bigger than it used to be.
Yeah.
But we regularly have employees parking on the street.
Yeah, really, in the employee lot, even if you are in there in the community room, there isn't a whole lot of space
No.
around the
Right.
corner.
Yeah.
And I think, can you park on both sides of Seymour? I think there's only parking on one side of Seymour.
Yeah, just on the east side of the street.
Yeah, so you only can park on one side of the street on Seymour,
Yep.
so
Yeah,
it's,
and McIntosh is there. You can park on McIntosh or
Yeah.
Henrietta. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
and those
a
are
lot-
narrow-
there's a lot of parking in that area.
and those are narrow streets too, so it's a tight little neighborhood.
Little fit,
It's
yeah,
parking
definitely.
wide.
Okay. Any other questions on the parking lot? If not, we'll go ahead and score that. And if you want to give us just a sneak peek on the shooting range and training facility,
Sure. The shooting range, this has been something that we've kind of, we put on our planning for probably the last 3 or 4 years. We currently have a shooting range that is on 3M property on the north end of the city, just outside the city actually. And the property is it's leased to us so that they don't charge us anything for it. And we have a full range facility with a little building and shelter there. And our concern is that at some point, at any time, 3M can pull that that consent for us to use that property. We have a 5-year lease, so we should have some notice of that, but our concern is that, something changes within their operations, that they need that space, or they, for some reason, don't want us to use that space anymore, and we'll have to pivot pretty quickly in order to have access to a range. We train on a monthly basis with our firearms, and so it's important that we have a close space to be able to practice our firearms and do what we need to do in terms of training. We do have, I think, our 2018 CIP request was the evidence facility, which is out on the west end in the industrial park. So we have built that, and there is land with that we could build a range on. So the idea in terms of, if you look at the request, it's $100,000 per year for 4 years, and we would take $100,000, do what we can to clear the trees, prepare the property for the range, and just do $100,000 worth of work for 4 years instead of asking for it in one lump sum. We didn't ask for it this year again because it's not a priority, I don't think, for the city. We still have access to a range of functions for us, so I don't think that we need it at this point, but
At one
we
point,
likely will need it in the future.
at one point, when we talked about that range facility and the parcel that we put the evidence building on, there was interest in constructing a better indoor facility at the current range with some, way better bathrooms than what's out there. And so that said, you guys were able to sell the Tommy guns, right? And gain to a collector and secure those funds that we were going to invest in that building. That building didn't get built because that range exists in the village of Maine. It's not a city site. And so we decided to hold off on a project of that size outside the city limits on property we don't own because it could turn out to be a moot investment. So at some point, I would assume if this project were to take flight, that building then would be incorporated into a plan like that. So we'd
Certainly.
finally be able to,
Yeah, we would need
Get that
some
going.
sort of shelter building out there on that site along with the range facility itself. We've even thought about, we do emergency vehicle operations training. We have to do that every other year for 4 hours by state law to retain our certification for police officers. And right now, we go to Merrill, to the NTC track in Merrill. And, it works. It's a nice track. It's a good facility, but it's half an hour away for our officers to drive up there and then drive back. So, we thought about, is there a way that we can incorporate some type of driving small track that we could use to make sure that we have the right skills and we can do it on a more regular basis because we're paying money every other year to drive up to Merrill and rent their facility. So,
Well,
there's a number of different things we've considered.
well, and then I assume that whoever's gone for that then is completely out of service to the community because you're now 20 minutes away. So, if the facility was in the city or closer to, if you had some situation that unfolded that became all hands on deck, it's not good to have, a whole group of people that's a city away, so.
Right. Yeah, and, it's a mixture between our off-duty staff and our on-duty staff that go up. The way we operate that is usually on an in-service day, which
Okay.
is an off time for officers to go up there. But inevitably, because we have officers that work Monday through Friday, they're on duty and they're up at Merrill doing that
Right.
training. So it would be good to have them in the city for that reason, yeah.
Right, I think going forward, that's something that we need to, take a serious look at. If we already own the land and we can optimize training ground and, and then kind of, I guess in a number of ways, kind of take your time doing it, where you can add things here and there without a huge, huge expense all at one time, so. But that's good to think about for future years, so. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
we've
Mike.
got a 5-year lease on the 3M property. When does that expire?
I think we just re-upped it within the last year or two, so I think we have a few years, yeah.
So we got plenty, so a 4-year transition plan gives us plenty of time then.
Right.
So, okay.
Okay. Any additional questions for Chief Bliven? If not, then we'll score the fencing proposal, but we won't score the other one. So that brings us to the end of the police presentation. The last one we have coming up is CCIT, which is IT. And they have a number of their requests often are on behalf of other departments that have all kinds of technology needs. So we don't have a rep in from IT yet, so.
I would be willing to start the financial management software since that's really
Yes, and my
Finance
understanding,
Department request?
my understanding was that the director from IT, though, is only available at 11:30, so
He actually is going to
is
come
he
down.
available early? Okay,
Yep,
so we
but
had
I can
asked
get us
him to,
started.
we'd asked him to also send a delegate if he wasn't able to come early,
Yep.
because we thought we'd be way ahead. So, yeah, if you want to start us off on
Sure.
the financial part.
So the city has used a company, our software is called Kayenta, and it was installed in 1992, so it's about 28 years old. And the firm, or the company that maintains that software has not done a lot of updates to it. So our software is very obsolete and behind the times as far as using current technology to help people be efficient in their jobs. The city and the county realized that we needed, and for Carrie's benefit, the city and the county share an IT department.
Okay.
So, and we do try to purchase our software on a collaborative basis when at all possible, because then it helps our IT staff be more efficient because they're only managing one software. And it also provides benefits to the departments because they can use each other's experience as we go about doing our work. So we've known for quite a few years that we needed to replace, and it was, looking at the priorities of our IT department, because they just recently went through a big upgrade in the law enforcement software. So there were things that had higher priorities from the IT department's standpoint. So finally, our project has reached a point where, for the county in particular, the systems really are breaking for them. And so today we use the same software. They're really, really struggling with the software. I mean, we are struggling as well, but not quite to the extent that the county is. But we started down a very robust and comprehensive process to figure out where we wanted to go as far as this acquisition. We went through a competitive RFP process, and we hired a consultant to help us look at our current processes to see how, with new software today, we can improve our processes and gain some efficiencies. So they helped us with process improvement. They wrote the RFP for us. It was a very comprehensive RFP in that they had to, the RFP itself was, 50 pages long or something like that, where we itemized all of the minimum requirements that we needed out of the financial software to ensure that we got modern software that would help us be very efficient. We received 13 proposals from firms for software. And so we read through those RFPs. We selected 3 or 4 top vendors that we wanted to hear from. We went through an extremely long process as far as reviewing the software itself. Each review was about 3 days, so that we were with those vendors for 3 full days. Of course, this was online because it was during the pandemic, but where they would, again, have a specific set of things that they had to demonstrate in advance. So it was a controlled process where they had to show us specifically that the software could perform the way we wanted it to perform. So, oftentimes vendors will say, oh yeah, we can do this, but it's really in development. It's not something that is actually working. So once we had conducted those demonstrations, we narrowed down the group to 2 main vendors. And then we went through another reference. We went through a reference check. We spent hours talking to clients that they had, not only their current clients, but client that they had listed in their actual proposal, but other clients that we were able to find that weren't listed in the proposal so that we could talk to them as well. We went through then another demonstration where they set up basically a sandbox where we all could actually use the software and try to perform the duties. And through that, we narrowed it down to a company called Workday. So Workday is our top candidate, and we were fortunate because, with the city and the county, you always wonder, oh my gosh, what happens if we're not in agreement when we're selecting that top candidate? It was a unanimous decision, so a lot of buy-in from the stakeholder group. Oh, and we also, in the demonstrations, invited stakeholders from every department. So all of the other departments were participated in the demonstrations. So, like the Parks Department, Public Works, and it was the department directors, middle management, if they were involved in the financial aspects, as well as the actual persons that typically are doing the clerical input, paying the bills, doing the invoicing. They were all invited to participate, and we, obtained their feedback as well. So we settled on a company called Workday. One of the big changes since we purchased our software 28 years ago was you purchased software, it sat on your network or your mainframe, and then it remained static until you went through some sort of update. Companies have really changed their format in software, and now they have what they call software as a service. So you're subscribing to the software. The benefit of that is that when they make an upgrade to their software, everyone is seeing that change immediately, and so you're not going through these lulls of no new technology, which is what we were experiencing with Kayenta. The software itself is very comprehensive. You think about financial software and you think, well, you pay your bills with it. But really, we not only pay our bills, we perform all of our payroll, we do all of our human resource tasks with it. So, hiring new employees, managing their training, tracking when they need evaluations, all of those things this software will do. It also is going to do our job costing for us. So our Public Works Department tracks how much time and materials they use when they do road patching, when they do winter maintenance, and that is required for our reporting to the state of Wisconsin, DOT for our Department of Transportation aids. So that's a key component, and the county also has to report to the DOT for their maintenance of state roads. So that is an important component. It does grant management for us. It does budgeting. It does what we call our point of sale, which is taking payments and communicating with all of the different financial software. So our point of sale software, if you go to the front counter and you pay, let's say, your water bill, the staff there uses one component of the software, and they, select, I want to pay water and sewer bill, and then that payment software communicates with the water and sewer utility accounts receivable system. So there's significant amount of integrations that have to be maintained and developed for the software. It also, we do our debt and investment management in the software. So you can see that it's going to touch literally every single department. The new software is going to provide a lot of efficiencies as well. Some of the major efficiencies, for example, we had a retirement for our payroll processing in 2016. We actually felt that it was necessary to get someone onboarded over a year and a half early because our current software is so cumbersome and labor intensive in how we need to manage that to take care of the different union contracts, and there's a thing called FLAZA, which when you have people who work overtime in unusual situations like our fire department, there's complex calculations that need to take place. So a year and a half before that retirement took place, we actually were onboarding that new payroll person so that we would be able to manage our payroll. And I think, from most companies, say that their employees are their biggest asset. Well, if you can't pay your biggest asset and comply with all the regulations, that is a huge risk. And so we were fortunate that we had advance notice that the person who left that job cared enough that she was willing to disclose, her retirement plans, and we were able to onboard that person. But in today's environment, people leave with 2 weeks' notice. And we would be in a difficult situation if we had that happen today because our payroll system is so difficult to use. So that is a example of some efficiencies that we know we'll gain that will not only provide us efficiencies, but will protect the city's investment in our financial records, our employees, and compliance. Another example of efficiencies that we will gain with the ERP system is an employee portal. So today, we're real old school on how we manage employees. If I want to change my, how much I'm sending to the credit union, I have to, fill out a form, send it up to HR. They have to then input it into the software, and then we have to, before it can be implemented.
So it's all manual?
Right, it's
Okay.
all manual. We print all of the payroll stubs. We have to then pass them out to all of the employees. The W-2s are printed and passed out when people are applying for a new homeowner's loan or a car loan, and they need paycheck stubs, and they toss them. When they need their W-2 because they lost it, they're coming to staff and saying, I need this, and we are having to dig into our, records, pull a copy of it, and give that to them. We will have an employee portal where all of that information will be accessible by the employees themselves. That is another example of the efficiencies. Our current financial software's reporting capabilities are so limited. I can tell you, I have spent probably at least 70 hours preparing our annual financial statement, and I'm not done yet. It's because there is no capacity in the software to accomplish that. And most communities pay their auditors. We have never paid our auditors. We've invested the time.
Yep.
That's time that could be used for reviewing our financial condition, making changes to policies that will help us save money. So it's always a change off. If you're doing, like writing numbers down and trying to prepare documents that are historical in nature, basically, because it was a snapshot of where we were on December 31st, you're not then able to spend time doing financial planning. This software has a very robust financial software reporting component to it that will expedite our financial reporting greatly. And we do a lot of financial reporting. I mean, we have a calendar with the Department of Revenue of all of our reports, room tax, TID reports, our annual state report. It's just a continual compliance reporting that we do within our department that will be made very efficiently. Today, we pay contractors to scan all of our documents so that we can access a vendor payment when we need to without having to go to a file cabinet. This new software will have that integrated. So today, if somebody says, oh, I know I paid Becker Hoppy back in June for, a airport engineering work. We have to go into the system and find it. Then we have to go to another software and look that up. And hopefully it's been to the vendor to image and is back from the vendor and imaged. So we oftentimes have gaps where that information is not available because it's off-site being imaged. This software has workflow built into it, so when the Parks Department gets an invoice, they will scan it as part of the payment process. So when payroll is done, all of this, when the weekly bills are paid, all of the documentation will be built at that moment. And that workflow also allows the department heads or the managers who review that work to review it through technology. So today, we're pushing papers. So, the Parks Department or Public Works or Municipal Court, they enter all of their AP for the week, and then they have all of those paper bills. They generate a cover sheet so their department director can sign it, and then they print out their edit list and they bring it to our accounts payable person who reviews it. And then at the end of that week, when all of the bills are paid, maybe, 10 different departments are all paying Wisconsin Public Service bills at that time. We have to take all of those separate bills and collate all of it from a paper standpoint.
Oh, my gosh.
So it takes, just the collation takes about a half a day on a Friday.
Wow.
All of that will be eliminated through this new software. Today, we do not do ACH payments to our vendors because our software does not have a good, efficient process to perform those duties. So we pay everything. We try to pay everything via check. That will be eliminated. Our bank reconciliation processes, our manual, and the city is paying bills. Our stack of bills each week are about this big. So just the bank reconciliation process takes us a long time. All of those things now will be automated. So
Nice.
the time savings is going to be significant from an employee standpoint. Again, not saying that we are necessarily going to eliminate employees, but it is going to help us be better at our jobs and do more work. We're always saying do more work, and there is increasingly more work to do every year. And so this is going to allow us to achieve those demands without hiring more employees. The other situation that we're finding ourselves in is, back in the day, I've worked for the city for 20 plus years, you just didn't have turnover. The only reason people left was to retire. And our benefit package really contributed to that staying attitude.
Retention.
Because we had, a retirement program that was not duplicated in the private sector. We received sick leave payout when we retired. Our health insurance benefits were, better than you could see in the private sector. When Act 10 came along, many of those benefits changed so that we were comparable to the private sector. And so as a result, people are more transient, and that those transitions of the workforce really make us difficult to manage because, you can't, it's much more difficult. The accounting that an accountant learns in their accounting degree, government accounting is oftentimes elective. You don't have to take government accounting when you graduate with an accounting degree, and it was one semester. So finding, and it's government accounting is significantly different than the private sector.
Yeah.
So finding candidates who have that experience, the onboarding process for new accountants is very long. So it makes it very difficult for us to manage our workload when we have turnover. So, we've had, since 2016, when I lost the assistant finance director and the person who was our payroll person, we migrated to a different job during that 2-year period that they were training. We have had basically kind of continual turnover in our department.
Yeah.
Accounts payable, assistant finance director, accountant. So it has been a challenge in the department keeping up and keeping people trained. I really believe that without going to modern software, we are going to continue to have to be challenged. And actually, I would say without going to new software, I need another accountant because
Yeah.
there's just too much work for us today. So this is a big dollar amount, but there's a lot of good reasons to do it. And like I said, our last investment was 28 years ago, so
This-
long time.
The money part of this, 1.8 million or just over, is that the city's share of the total?
Yes.
So it's actually twice that, because county would pay half,
County is paying more than half.
more than half, okay?
Jerry
right.
can speak, and
well.
I
Yeah.
just, since this was the ERP software, I thought I could.
This is
do-
awesome. You're doing a
do-
great job. Keep going.
No,
do
it's
a-
all
a
good.
Came
good
in, I'm
job
like, she's
of that.
already doing what I need to do.
We started off with
I'll
that.
cry if anyone
should've waited
needs me
longer.
to, I'll cry.
Well, we'll start it off with that. Well, and so, and as we review all the IT projects, Jerry, we've been actually offering our presenters the option to sit over in my seat at District 7 and talk with us so that we're talking with you and not at you. This room has kind of an odd vibe where it kind of feels like court. So if our presenters are more comfortable sitting around a table with us and presenting in that context, we certainly welcome you to do that too.
And I'd like to add one other thing. The one other thing that when we, I told you about the amount of time we spent talking to references who had gone through this process. The process is going to take about 14 months to implement. And all communities that we talked to that had gone through the implementation process said how difficult implementation is because, you have to set the software up. You have to go through the training, you have to go through the testing, you have to go through data conversion, and it's very laborious, and there's a huge time commitment to this, where we're gonna be asking our employees to work a lot of extra hours to accomplish this. I am going to be 62 in August, so my days here are numbered. I don't have a retirement date set, but it's coming. And I think that I have a lot of institutional knowledge with the organization that will be good for the conversion. And I think that we need to, and I'm kind of a workaholic anyhow, so I think you should
No.
take advantage of that while you have it. So that when a new finance director comes in, that they will be able to not have to go through this. Companies told us, other communities told us they lost 50% of their staff during implementation. That was
Oh, my
kind of the
goodness.
message. So this is going to be a really challenging time.
Challenging.
And I'm hoping council can recognize the challenge that we're going to have during the process. But that is another reason to invest, is to basically take advantage of the experience that I have here.
For sure.
And, I'm not bragging, but I have a strong government accounting experience. I was a government auditor before I started, so I have what we need and what we need for financial reporting. I have kind of the start to finish as far as institutional knowledge, and I don't think that everyone has that, and I think it will get us a better product, though.
Sure.
So, because we're going to be
Because you'll be able to
developing
say,
and.
this is what we're missing.
Right,
how
when
do
you,
we-"
because we're going to go through and create a whole new chart of accounts. And if you know what you need at the end for all of these financial reports, you're going to do a better job of setting up your chart of accounts. So I guess that's my plea on the ERP system.
So on the money end, it's a huge, long implementation, so could we do phased borrowing? Or, I mean, obviously, if
We
we commit to the
could.
project, we would make sure that we have an earmark in the future budget so that, that money is reserved, that it's unavailable to a future council to make changes to that commitment, because you can't do half a job. But, if we could phase the borrowing, I think that would allow us to work a plan like this in with everyone else's needs also and weigh them. I think a number like this could wipe out the entire CIP.
Right.
Including some of the street stuff if we aren't careful. So,
And I do think it would be, like, we generally only borrow for projects like facilities and our street replacements. And then all of the other projects we try to pay cash for.
Yeah.
As I said, our last investment in this financial software was 28 years ago. And, that was part of our robust evaluation process, was picking a company that was, an IT companies to our, they can be a mirage, basically, of
Like gobble each other up
their
and then, yeah.
stability, yes.
Yep.
And so, we spent a lot of time trying to find something where we could tell that the continual investment was taking place, that they were still a growing company, but they were managing their growth so that they would be able to provide us good service. And so, I feel comfortable putting this into borrowing. And as Lisa said, we could look at our payment schedule. Typically they get paid at
benchmarks, right?
benchmarks. So there might not be, given that it's a short implementation, there might not be a lot of, shouldering between 2 years. But the other thing that we could do too is look at how long we wanted to borrow for, and maybe, not borrow for a full 10 years to minimize interest. The other thing that I did want to point out is that NTC is currently implementing Workday too. So, from a support standpoint of having other local users where we can put together, a brown bag lunch communication and, again, utilize each other's knowledge.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very, very beneficial. And actually, Leslie, our city clerk, used Workday at Marshfield Clinic when she was working there. And she, as a user, certainly she wasn't working in the financial department, but as a user, had nothing but great things to say about it too. So
That's a
I
plus.
did want to mention that as well.
Okay. Questions? Yep, go ahead.
Jerry, hi.
Hi, Ed.
How long have you been with the city-county data?
Myself personally, 14 years.
Okay. And we have 14-plus years of your institutional knowledge.
You do. Indeed.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so we have Mary Ann's 20-plus years of institutional knowledge in the environment we're in now, which I guess the point I'm looking at is you're getting kind of old for a CI person, not meaning
Come on.
disrespect. But with Mary Ann's points and yours,
Yeah.
we stand a good chance in the next 4 or 5 years of losing a lot of institutional knowledge. Meaning no disrespect to
No,
either
it's
of
fine.
your ages or experience.
I understand. So let me add a few things. Mary Ann did an awesome job of explaining the why. I'll just add a couple of things. She mentioned a couple of times about payroll and how inefficient that process is, and accounts payable. I can't remember if you mentioned that as much as well, but a lot of the processes that we have today are very paper oriented. And with the software that we have, the Kayenta software that we have, that's literally 26 years old. I mean, granted, the vendor has been doing some updates, but it's not been a good vendor. They haven't been investing in that product. Workday is a very modern product. It's a cloud solution. Everybody's on the same version. So they do updates. They do 2 big updates a year, and all of their customers get it at the same time. So they give us a test site, and then we test it with all their other customers. If we identify problems, they stop and fix it before the go live date. But then they move everybody on the same day. And so there's pros and cons to that. Of course, we have to test on their schedule, not ours. That's a disadvantage in my opinion. But they're always adding functionality to it. The other vendor that we looked at that was a close second to this, although you can get a hosted solution from them, you're still, everybody that we talk to is on old versions of it because it's such an effort to do the upgrades.
Oh, geez, okay.
So there's a couple of things though. So the biggest, on the Advantage side, Mary Ann covered a lot of it, but this tool gives a workflow engine to every part of it. And that's, in my opinion, is the biggest benefit. So you set up these workflows and you kind of do it graphically. You know, in the accounts payable side, you're like, okay, I'm getting this bill in and I'm handling it and applying it to this purchase order, and then I'm paying them with an ACH, and this person needs to approve it. Maybe the department manager needs to approve it, and then Mary Ann needs to approve it if it's over a certain dollar amount. That's all stuff that you both set up ahead of time, but it's also then automation once you're done.
Wow.
And payroll is the same way. The payroll side of it is really manual what we do. And so these guys offer, and maybe you guys have already seen this, they offer, they'll basically be a portal. Employees can look at their paycheck stubs from home. They can change their address, their home address from themselves instead of calling us, which they do now. When we're ready to set up enrollment in health insurance and that kind of thing, there's a whole suite of this piece that's just open enrollment and setting that process up. So if Tony and her team would be setting up, here's the insurance choices you have, this is the date you have to be done by, and then employees go and do it themselves. So there's a lot of, there's just a ton of automation that can be done from that. There's a couple of key things though. The price that you have in front of you is not even the correct price. We are still working with them on finalizing that, and we're not going to have that until the finance meeting on August 10th is when I'm hoping to have the correct costs on it. This is going to cost a lot more than we've ever spent on this. Today, our Kayenta system that we bought a long time ago, we pay software maintenance on that. It's about $250,000, and then I split that, and the county pays about 70. I think it's 65/35. I'm trying to remember exactly. Mary Ann Carol can maybe correct me. We're going to do the same thing with this. We're going to split it so that the county pays, sort of 2/3 and you guys pay 1/3. But we're talking about a project that's really more like $7 million. And so it was a huge amount of spend up front. What I'm hoping to have, and I'm not even sure I'm going to have this, but we're still working on the statement of work with all of the software vendors. There's 5 software vendors involved. I'm hoping to have that for the August 10th finance meeting. And then we would bring it to council later in August. And here's why. We want to get going on this project. It's a 16 to 18 month long project. And there's a lot of things that drive schedules for Mary Ann and her team. So for example, they would say, we can't really help you on anything in January and probably a little into February. So you have blackouts in that. And then you also have payroll schedules. And so the vendor has set up a schedule that says, ideally we have the contract signed in August or September at the latest, and then we lay out this 15 to 18 month cycle that's after that. So what I'm expecting to do, and you guys can, this is part of why I'm here, and part of why I'll be at county board in August, is I'm anticipating doing this the same way we did the financial system, or the record system for law enforcement. So if you were here and involved, and Ed, you were probably at the beginning of that when we first asked for money back in around 2014, we wanted to replace the law enforcement system, which was also long in the tooth. And so we bought a system that all of the law enforcement agencies in the county use. So the Sheriff's Department and the Wausau Police Department were, of course, by far the 2 biggest entities. And then Everest Metro is the next one. And all of them got together and said, we need to be on the same system so that we can share records, so that we can send people to jail from one system, because we're using a single jail, we're using a single dispatch center. And so what we ended up doing for that was, over a 2-year period of CIP requests, we got it funded. And then we bought that through City County IT, because we were going to share it. And then I distributed the capital cost and the operating cost. And then with that system, I distribute it to everybody that uses it. So Cronawetter, Mosinee, Stratford, everybody pays some piece of it every year. This system, in our current environment, our Canta system is about $250,000 a year for software maintenance. Just the Workday piece of this is close to $700,000 a year. And then we have 3 other pieces of software we need to buy. So so you have, in front of you, you're gonna have, I'm just trying to be honest with you. You haven't seen the total cost yet, and you, Mary Ann's not enjoying this part of the discussion. But I'll split that up the same way we did the other one. We'll, approximately 2/3 will be paid for by the county and 1/3 by the city. What I'm expecting is if you want me to do it that way, the same way we did the other one, city county IT would be the signer on the contract. But I can't sign a contract that takes, that has a multi-year commitment unless I've got buy-in from the city and the county, because you guys are funding it, right? I don't have any money on my own. Every year you guys give me money and then I spend it. So I'm anticipating having the total cost together in the August 10th meeting, and then your council, I asked the mayor if she would consider having a council meeting on the 24th of August, which is not on the schedule because you guys are planning to only have one in August. That would allow me to potentially get approval from you guys that night and then from the county later that night. And then I would be able to sign the contracts after we get the lawyers to all agree on the language on the contracts. And
So
I would be
we-
signing a contract that has payments, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So we basically then would be ratifying a component of the 2022 budget, even in advance of that budget prep
Yeah,
early. And
Yeah.
I will just say that based on the dynamics that exist amongst our current council, prepare a robust presentation. There's no fooling, because there's only a couple of
Yeah.
us in the room that now are privy to all the things that are right and wrong. And with numbers that large, that's going to be a struggle.
I get that.
It's going to be a struggle.
That's
So-
why I wanted to lay out what was in front of us with you guys today.
Yep.
Today.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's an easier discussion to have here and even with the finance committee, but, when we try to bring on, 8 others that have not been privy to any of this, it's gonna be an uphill climb.
I think what would be useful is to put into some written material, either PowerPoint slides or whatever, really what Mary Ann covered ahead of time,
Yes.
which is, here's all of the reasons we need to do this.
For sure.
And we would have that handed out ahead of time, right, Mary Ann? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, when you look on Jerry's schedule here of implementation, one of the other things we're trying to, when we put together that calendar of implementation is, payroll, it's good if, it would be ideal if you could implement at the end of the year and start a new W-2 cycle with new software. We're not going to accomplish that, but then you try to get where you're at a quarter because,
Sure.
we do so much reporting, regulatory reporting monthly and quarterly that you really want to try to accomplish that. And if you think about it, people are tracking their time for the next pay period 2 weeks in advance. So you
Right.
have to, you have to have it all timed. It's the intricate process trying
Yeah.
to onboard new software where you're able to maintain the integrity of your data, especially with financial software. So, and I think that's the position that we found ourselves in is this ticking clock of that time schedule, the funding, the approval. We all of a sudden kind of find ourselves in a tight situation. I mean, the one thought I had too was, maybe if the August meeting is available, of using that more as an educational and not asking anyone to make a decision, and then use the first meeting in September as the decision-making so that people aren't
Well, and then there's
required
time to ask questions also
Yeah.
and get
Right.
additional info, because they may have
Whereas-
questions that we never thought of.
Right, because
Yeah.
the county has an informational process built into their meeting schedule
Yes.
that we don't have.
Correct.
So that
No, I-
might be another option. But you
Totally
If we
look
can get
at-
something signed around that schedule, then we would probably go live 15 months later at the end of the year. If we miss it, let's say we ended up waiting, let's say the budget process, Lisa, ends up saying, well, we're not going to get this approved until budget's approved in November.
Geez, yeah.
We'd be looking at the first or second quarter of 2023, most likely the end of second quarter, it would be my guess.
Sure.
It's probably
Well,
schedule-wise.
and I think it's important to indicate what the cost of delay is and what operational struggles happen
Yeah.
with that delay, I think that's going to be key pieces of information that they're going to want to know. You know, even if we would recommend to send this forward at our August 9th meeting, you know, when this committee makes decisions, those really are just the recommendations that go to the finance committee for when they start their workshops in October. So we're going to be ahead of
Right.
all of that, which I think is efficient. I think we certainly should do that. Hopefully that'll be well received. The only question that I would have for you, based on the exhaustive implementation of this and all of the steps that have to happen, I know that CCITC already constantly has a full workload. Do you have the availability in your schedule and calendar to pull this off? Assuming it gets funded and
That's a great question.
multi-agency impacts, can you guys pull it off on time with the resources you have?
What I meant, well, so what the county's, what Lance and Christie and I have already talked about at the county is that they're planning to, well, Lance's direction to me was, you know, put into the project budget what's going to be needed to do. And I don't know, Mary Ann and I haven't had a whole lot of conversation about this particular piece yet, but what Christie's anticipating doing is having me in there, when it gets presented to the county, is having them to have staff augmentation. So she's planning to hire a contractor in her department that's going to be buried into the project, well, buried is a bad term, I guess, but you know, in the project budget, the resources. When we did our due diligence with the people that have done these projects, Mary Ann said there was high turnover. It was because of stress of the work. And a lot of the recommendations we got were expect to backfill people so that they're available to do this work. So Mary Ann and I will end up needing to have that conversation to figure out what she wants to have in your proposal.
We also heard from different governments that they tried to backfill and were unsuccessful in the process because the labor
Right.
shortage
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
you know, and if people are looking at a limited term employment contract versus, but I do have some ideas. You know, Christy and I have talked about, you know, perhaps using interns in the summer.
Sure.
You know, there might be some retired accountants that I know that might, you know, be willing to pick up some hours. You know, we could certainly
with the
look.
process.
Inside of the IT side of it, we have our best project manager is going to move from projects that she's on now to this one. Connie Lessig, our main application financial analyst, is going to be dedicated to this project. She's the one that also keeps the Kayenta up, so hopefully Kayenta won't have too many problems while we're doing this.
Right.
What
Let's hope
I'll
not.
be short is the HR side of this is I don't have another resource to move on to this that's what I would call an application analyst that can deal with all of the human resource side of this. So I'm going to be shorthanded in that role, and Mary Ann's going to what she's going to cover, what she just talked about is there's going to be need to have some extra capacity.
Okay.
There's 3 other software products I just wanted to briefly mention. This doesn't do everything we need, and as is in our current place. We're also, as part of this project, going to replace our cashiering system, which is a system called Active that we bought, Mary Ann, maybe like 11 years ago? Something like that. I was here, I know. Did you talk about that before I came in?
Well, I explained how the software works.
Yep.
Okay.
And why it's critical, but.
So her staff out front, one of the things that, before we bought Active, before we bought a cashiering system, what they had to do is, someone walked up and they wanted to pay taxes, they had to open up the tax software. Then they wanted to pay for a permit, they had to open permitting software. Then they wanted to pay a parking ticket, they had to open up that. So it was really hard to teach those people, and as Mary Ann said, we have higher turnover now than we did pre-Act
Right.
Act 10. And so, actually, I think Mary Ann was very visionary at the time, because this is before Act 10. She said, I need to be able to onboard people faster. I need a simple thing. It needs to look like, the amount of time that you need to teach someone to run a cash register at Best Buy. That kind of thing. So we put in a system called Active, basically has a bunch of nice icons, and you're like, I want to pay taxes. And then we had 7 interfaces behind it, which took a long time to do, by the way. It took about a year to do. That product is dead from that vendor. They haven't been doing any development on that for probably 3 years, maybe 4. And I had actually asked for funding for that the last 2 CIPs, I think, that we got denied. So what Workday recommended for this was a product called Teller, which is a modern version of that. So I'm anticipating buying the Teller product. There's a piece of this that does debt management. We're looking at a product called Tracker. They recommended a product that was more than we needed, so we said, well, we're probably not going to buy the one you're recommending for debt management. We're going to buy a smaller one. Marianne actually went out and found one that she likes and Christie's satisfied with. So that's a third-party contract
was
that we'll sign.
cheaper.
And it's a lot cheaper. And then the third piece is Cartograph, and that's probably the piece that we'll buy and use in parks, highway, and DPW, and that has inventory management and job costing. And so job costing, just to briefly explain, when we plow a parking lot, we want to know, this isn't the perfect example, but it's the one I'm going to use. When we plow a parking lot, we want to know what vehicle got used. So we used this plow for an hour, we used this person for an hour, and we used 300 pounds of salt. And that allows us to job cost and say that it took us $500 to do that parking lot. And then Mary Ann can charge that to a specialized account. We have the same needs in parks, the same needs in the highway department. So we need to find a good solution for that. Workday is none of these products are very mature in that little space, so we'll probably buy a product to do that. There's one called Chems. We want to replace CFA, which is in your list here, in the IT request as well. We looked at some demos of a product called Cartograph that we think is a good fit for that.
Okay,
So you have some other CIP requests if I should move on.
sure. Does anyone have questions on the financial part? We did a kind of a deep dive into this, but it is probably the largest one in the book,
Yeah, it's
so.
by far your largest
It's the
one, so.
largest project in the book.
It's gonna be a
I
big
just
ask.
have a general question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Is there any, this is probably a dumb question, but is there any funding from anywhere else that could help this? Like software nationally or grant funding or something like that could be?
I'm not aware of any. And like, the biggest pot of money we have in front of us is the ARPA funds, and there's nothing in the ARPA fund language that says that we could use it for anything close to this.
Okay.
Water, sewer, broadband, replacement funds, there's that. I mean,
There's no
that's-
like tech improvement?
No.
And I do
There used to be
think-
a lot of space in that in law enforcement days, but they don't even have any of those grants anymore.
If the,
We
if the
have-
infrastructure bill passes, is there, I mean, IT infrastructure is a big part of that. Does it get far enough down, though, into the meat of applications people need to do their?
Yeah,
job.
I've seen little bits and pieces that the infrastructure bill that might get passed may include more than just roads and highways, but I haven't seen any detail on it yet.
Well, there's all kinds of, I mean, in addition to a huge proposal for, human infrastructure, I think the advent of technology and, preparing people to run it and whatnot. And so I wonder if there's any technology component of that might apply. I mean, I guess we'd find that out in the future,
Yeah.
assuming we would appropriate budget funds to invest in this project. If we would become available later of some kind of grant opportunity or secondary fund source, we'd certainly capitalize on that and then not spend the appropriated amount and then, either earmark that for something else or hold it over for, future use, so.
I would say too that we are getting some cost benefit from the fact that the city and county are purchasing together. And we also are allowing the vendor to, and really ourselves to be efficient in that we are developing one chart of accounts. And we actually are going to generate one vendor file, one vendor list. So we're going to go through our vendors and compile one central vendor list and one central customer receivable list, which will allow us to be more efficient as well. I think the other thing that we didn't cover is, like today, how we reimburse the county for parks operation is somewhat cumbersome because, all of the bills are paid at the county and then they bill us and then we send them the check. And if they need something, they have to ask us to see a copy of it. Whereas now that, because we're using one chart of accounts.
be able to
and
view it.
We'll be able to connect. So it's actually, and we are almost one of the kind in the state as far as what we do in the IT realm and how we share today. So,
Yeah.
I think we're just gonna move up and become a better poster child, right?
Maybe.
Yeah,
I
no,
would
I
think.
mean, city county IT it's the only one in Wisconsin. It's the only shared service IT organization in Wisconsin that goes across the city and county government. There's a few city and counties that do stuff together, like own specific applications, Eau Claire, Door County, Madison. But this one, I mean, I haven't calculated that. That might be an interesting thing to look at is what would it have costed if we just did it ourselves?
Oh heavens,
but-
I'm not sure I want to hear that number.
No, but I mean, yeah, exactly. It might make, I don't know if it'd make you feel better
I
or
had sticker
worse.
shock with what you gave us.
Yeah.
But we won't
but,
be
you know,
able
I
to
really think
accomplish
there's a lot-
that if we won't be able to accomplish those things if we develop a different time schedule than the county does.
Right.
Correct.
And there's the cost of the two softwares. You know, the city would have to fund continuing on with Kayenta because the county most likely is going to go forward. You know, they have their sales tax funding and they're a little bit more established as how they, you know, can fund their CIP projects. And so I think that they're better set for.
I think it's very likely that they're going to approve this. We made a really hard pitch with them last fall, and so they already have 1.8 million set aside. Their piece of this is going to be in the $4 or $5 million range, but they have a big chunk already there.
Well, and that's the struggle that
And
we've
we
had
have
before,
about-
is where county will fund their half, and then we either can't, or the council is unwilling to fund its half, and then we're left with staggered timelines, which is not good.
No,
So,
it's not.
okay. Michael, did you have a
Yeah,
question?
just
Go ahead.
A couple things here.
Yep.
But, yeah, just to kind of first speak to infrastructure, I don't, you know, I think one of the downfalls we have with infrastructure is that software's considered an intangible product, so it never fits into the nuts and bolts of running, you know, of building something. So I can see the difficulty there. And I know, you know, when we talk about shared county and city services, we certainly, going it alone, we would never have the robustness of information technology that the city of Wausau really enjoys, that is missing in a lot of other communities. My question, though, you know, we're looking at, for 2022, 1.8, you know, estimated, what is estimated numbers, $1.8 million to kick this project off, and then after that is the subscription services, which would be the continued service and support of the product of approximately $250,000 a year, which gets us to our 5-year cost of $2.8 million. So we would really think of the $250,000 as a carrying cost in subsequent budgets. I guess this might
Right.
be more of a question to Mary Ann. Would we be able to?
Operating expense.
Would we be able to manage that in a future budget?
Well, it's definitely going to have an impact, but we will be getting rid of other software too that we're maintaining, that have costs associated too.
Yeah,
So-
so-
And didn't you say that number's not even real right now, because you don't know what it's gonna be?
I don't have the number. The way you're looking at it is not the real number.
Yeah.
I won't have it until August 10th at the earliest.
Yeah, so these numbers are.
They still haven't even sent me. We met with them and went through some statement of work and went back and forth on, well, what can city county IT do for reporting? What interfaces can we do versus you guys? And I don't actually have the numbers yet.
Okay.
But we'd be able to, that's, you know, I suppose just kind of rejiggering other software products around and eliminating the Kayenta support, which I can't imagine isn't.
You're paying
Yeah.
about a third of 250 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
it's a decent amount too.
Okay.
Approximately.
So there are some savings there, but there's also going to be an added expense in future years.
Sure.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think
Okay.
it's a huge value to have the city and county finance departments on the same system because of what Mary Ann just talked about. They're going to use the same chart of accounts, they're going to use the same vendor. We're going to actually manage the vendors together. And the two finance directors have worked together great over my 14 years here. I've been with both of them. They will get together and talk about what could we do more efficiently. And they'll, having them on, continue to work together on the same software system is going to be
Well, I think-
invaluable.
I think the key here is just we're not just talking about financial management software, but we're talking about ERP or enterprise resource planning, which is, it's like 2 or 3 levels above financial management.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's, people ask, how can you make government run more efficiently? And this is the way to do it, is to have tools like this in order to, fix the problems that we have, which typically is what's our job, is to spend money. And if we can do it more efficiently and have a planning process in place, then in the long run, we will be saving the taxpayers' dollars, even though that this is a staggering number to look at right now.
It is. When I talk about, often I've said to people that the wheels of government turn slowly, and that isn't just in decision-making and voting, it's everything, because sometimes the operations of government are so large and the processes aren't necessarily streamlined, that the wheels do turn slowly. And I think this really allows people to work together in a different way and in a more productive way. So, for all the wheels we have that are still slow, if we can improve some of these internal processes, we can start to address some of that as well. So
Yeah.
I think this is,
It's all about the workflow piece that this
it's
thing
a
gives. It's the
forward-thinking
automation of
investment. I think
workflow.
that it's going to be incumbent upon, if this committee chooses to fund this item, it'll be incumbent upon, us and you guys to make sure that there's a robust communication so that everyone involved, including the community that pays the bills, understands what this is and why, and that it's not just, yet another accounting program. It's way, way more than that. So it's a substantial investment, but I think with good communications, we can probably get there. So
I like Mary Ann's idea, though. Did we do an educational presentation
I
on the
totally agree,
24th,
because
and
I
then
think,
Yeah,
we give them some
exactly.
time to ingest that and then
yes,
have it on
because
the
the
September
time
meeting.
between the information and the ask needs to be a week or two, so that they have time to
Yeah.
digest it and ask questions, and, I think that's
I
fair.
I
You guys
totally
are-
agree.
Yeah.
So
I look forward to
second
seeing that.
Tuesday in September? Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so you have a couple other ones, I wanted to go through
Yep,
those.
go ahead.
These are kind of really straight technical ones, so let's talk about those so you understand what they are. So the first one, and I'm going to go through them in the priority that I have. Hopefully it matches the one that you had. So there's basically sort of three components to our net. There's four components to the network that all of our employees run on. So there's the cabling from Mary Ann's PC goes into a closet. So her laptop has wiring that goes to the wall and goes into a closet, and it plugs into a box with all of the other wires from her area, and that's called a switch. So we do 24-port and 48-port switches, and so then there's basically a closet on each floor of each building that we have. And so fire department, police departments, everybody's got one of these switches. And typically they're 48 ports. Most of the switches we have are running end of life next year, meaning Cisco has said we're not going to support them anymore. If there's a software bug in them, we're not going to fix them. And so we have a big chunk of switches that are at end of life next year, and then some the following in 2024. That was just a part of the reason that there was a bigger group together was when we put in the new phone system 10 years ago. We had to replace all the switches because they needed to have this technology called power over Ethernet. They needed to be able to have electricity in them. So we replaced a lot of switches together. So we need to replace a fair amount of switches that are going to be at end of life next year. So we're going to replace at City, County, and North Central together. It's 209,000. What we need to do in the city buildings is 23,000 next year. I know that's below your $30,000 mark, but I don't have any other way to
Not
do
so
this.
bad.
So your piece is 23,000. So that would be the switches in your fire stations, your police station, and this building, and some of the public works stuff. Although I have to tell you, most of the public works stuff is getting replaced because of all the construction projects down there
Okay.
this year. So there's a whole bunch of new switches and access points and stuff that went in there. So that's the switches. I mentioned there are four pieces. So then all of those switches have fiber between them, and they go to what Cisco calls switches, and those are core switches. That's item 4 on your list. And then they go from there, I'm going backwards out towards the internet now. They go through firewalls before they go to the internet, and then stuff coming back goes through firewalls. And then the servers that we have we have a combination of servers that we have in-house, and then we have stuff in the cloud. So your item 2 is server replacement. It's called data center refresh on your list. The data center, basically what we have is, when you used to buy servers, you used to buy what we call in the industry called pizza boxes. You have a big rack with screw holes up the whole thing, and you'd buy a server which is about this wide, and it'd go into one, and the bigger ones would be 2 or 3 spaces, and then they'd be this big. That's old technology. All of the new stuff is you put in basically a box that has all kinds of processors in it, and then you put in a box that has all kinds of storage in it, and you can tell them to make as many switches, or you can run as many servers on, they're called virtual servers. So we have virtualized almost everything we have. We have about 230 servers. Almost all of them are, anything that can be virtualized is already virtualized. And so we have shared that resource, that server and its storage and the fiber interconnect between them across the city and county and North Central when we did it last time, and I'd like to do that again. The replacement for that is $400,000. The city's portion of that would be 128. So I'm asking North Central and the county to fund their two pieces of it. The city has about 30 servers of the 220-ish or so that we have. 30 of them are yours. That's stuff that we have that we're still running here, and then you also have stuff that you're running in the cloud. I'm not talking about the stuff in the cloud. I'm just talking about the ones that we have to run here. So that's your second. That's item 3. So the first one was your financial system. Your second one was $23,000 for replacing switches that are at end of life next year. By the way, that ask is also $23,000 the following year because we identified which ones are dead next year and which ones are dead in 2024. And then the data center refresh is item 3. That's $400,000. Your piece of that is $128,000. And then this next one is kind of interesting. When COVID hit, we tried to send as many people home as possible. Anybody whose job could be done from home, we wanted to send home. And we moved from about 10 or 15 people working remotely on any given day to about 120 and then about 300 within 2 weeks. We have a pretty robust, I don't know if Lisa and Ed, you were here when we put in the Wausau Community Area Network. You may recall that. So back in about 8 years ago, we were using a really low-speed internet connection that was constantly jammed up and full, and it was expensive. We had an opportunity in the last recession to get grant funding to put in a fiber network around the city, and so we put in this big Z-shaped fiber network. We invested in it. The city and the county invested in it. North Central Technical College invested in it, and the school district invested in it. And we put in 11 miles of fiber. And then as part of that project, we went to a new internet service provider called WISNet, which is a nonprofit, one that really serves the educational industry. And they put in they had a fiber that came through Wausau but didn't stop here. They had fiber that connected their UW Eau Claire office to their UW Green Bay campus. And so as part of that project, they agreed to put in a new connection in Wausau, and they put that in at the State Patrol building. We went from having a 100 megabit charter connection to a 10 gigabit connection that's at the State Patrol building. That was so much speed, we didn't even need to light it up at that speed, but we had the capacity to do that. So we had a gig connection between us and them, us and the State Patrol building for the last couple of years. COVID hit. We sent all these people home at North Central, some from the city and some from the county. And immediately, like I said, we went from about 10 or 15 people being at home to 100 and then 300 in the snap of a finger. So our firewall, our internet firewall that has to handle that, it's called our VPN environment. I don't know how many are you familiar with that term, but VPN allows you to work at home. It encrypts the connection between my laptop when I'm at my house and the connection here. It couldn't handle it, so we put in 2 new firewalls in that 2-week period, and that allowed us to go up to about 500. I'm sure we got this right. I think that allowed us to go up to a couple hundred megabits. And now we have so many things that we're doing in the cloud, like the Workday project that's in front of us. We keep doing more and more stuff on the internet. More and more of our traffic, instead of going from my laptop to the server in the back in the server room upstairs, now goes from my laptop to a server in Chicago or server in New York. We're actually at capacity in our 2 firewalls. We need to replace our 2 VPN firewalls, and that's your item 4. That's your internet firewall request. That's $260,000. Your portion of it, sorry, really small font on this, is $33,000. Yeah, the county's is 122, and the North Central piece is 104. And the reason for that is we evaluated the number of connections going through that firewall. So that's a super important project. I really hope you fund it because we're at capacity on that. And when we go to Workday and other cloud solutions, it's only going to get worse. So that's gonna take our speed up significantly. It's going to take it up to, I think, Let me grab this, it's important. It's in your notes, but I don't have it memorized, I apologize. All right. Okay, so currently we have a 10 gig connection at the State Patrol, but our firewalls only handle up to 750 megabits. So we have a 10 gig connection available in Rib Mountain to us, but we're currently able to do up to 750 megabits, so about 1/15 of it.
So would the new upgrade allow full utilization if it was ever needed?
It'll go up to 5 gig is the
Okay.
prices you have in front of us. We actually researched going to full 10 gig firewalls,
Yeah.
and they were super expensive.
Okay,
So we're surviving under 750 right now, so we think going to 5 gig will buy us a couple of years.
sure.
But again, as we go to more and more cloud solutions, we're gonna use that even more and more, so it's gonna get even worse.
But
Well,
by,
that's-
you know, by then we'll hit capacity in a couple, 3 years and technology will change, it'll be cheaper and then
Yeah.
it'll
And-
make sense to upgrade.
And remember, all of that stuff is all over fiber now, so we can go from 10 gig to 100 gig you can just buy faster optics.
Sure,
So that,
but without replacing that infrastructure.
we need to replace these firewalls right now.
Right.
Because they're basically running at full capacity right now.
Okay,
And then the last one is a core switch upgrade. I mentioned there's kind of those 4 components. The core switches are the ones that talk to all of the other networks. And we do need to replace that. I have it as 4th because if I had to give something up, that's the one I could give up, because I could do that one in 2023 instead in 2022. But the reason I put it on here, and I asked, our network manager wanted it on here, is the new versions of these things have a lot more security functionality in them than we can currently do. It would be ideal to replace this in 2023 because it would give us access to new security features, but we could survive on that until 2024. It is at an end of life in 2024, so we'd have to replace it then for sure.
okay,
And then the last thing on your list, hopefully you have in your package, is the council chambers. So I came here 14 years ago. The equipment that you're using in this room was all here. And it was so old then that Andy Zinda, who's one of our long-term staff, said, nobody that was involved in installing this is here anymore. We don't have any documentation on it. It's right behind the American flag over there. There's a whole rack of equipment in there. The only thing we have replaced is the cameras in here and some of the controls for the public television guys. But what really needs to happen with this room is we need to pull all of that stuff in the back room out. We need to replace your microphones. What I'm envisioning, because we've done a pretty good job in the assembly room, is something fairly similar to what's in the county's assembly room, probably right behind Lisa, where those 2 signs are. I would envision cutting that whole piece out, clean, obviously it'll have to look nice, but putting a big TV there. This TV would probably stay here. We would put in a voting piece of voting software, although I think, Marianne, I think there's an interest in trying to put the voting software in this fall, right? And then we would put in real video conferencing. What we're doing today, when you guys were trying to work over WebEx, was really kludgy. We were running WebEx on this PC up here, and then we were kind of feeding that to that monitor over there, and the poor guy in back was like zooming in on that TV monitor to show people on public television what was going on. There's a much better modern way to do that. You put in a real video controller in the back room there. We would replace the controls in this room. Your voting stuff, those buttons that you have in front of you would be done on a smartphone or on an iPad. You'd have an app on there that would be the voting side of it. The stuff that you have in that closet is literally probably 18 to 20 years old.
I was thinking probably when we remodeled City Hall, it got installed.
Yeah.
maybe when this room was
2002
changed.
That was the first time we had that stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was state of the art then.
I think
It isn't anymore.
There's a
It is-
VCR in there still, so.
There's a VCR in there, yeah. I think there's
And-
actually a 6-disc CD player in there too. That
Right.
was probably
And-
the latest technology
It
at
was,
the time.
it was the latest and greatest,
So it's, the 130 in here is maybe a little high. I did get an estimate that was a little lower than that, but, by the time I go buy it, one of the things that's going on right now is the IT industry is like the car industry and many of the other industries in the US. We are having serious problems with getting some materials in, and the cost of materials are going up because of chip demand.
Well,
So,
and, the struggle
That's a
I have.
challenge we
The
have.
struggle I have, and I know that the stuff in this room isn't optimal, and I know oftentimes our, delivery to the public in terms of AV is not, as optimal as it certainly could be. But I have serious difficulty with replacing the council's equipment before we replace the staff's equipment. Because at the end of the day, we're here, 5, 6 nights a month.
Yeah.
And, we can make a decision whether we make it in a flashy fashion or not. And so, WebEx and the way we did it wasn't optimal, but we still got our work done and people were still able to see and hear us. And so, yes, it's a need. And if we had limitless funds, would we like to have that? Absolutely. But, given all of the other needs and the magnitude of the needs, I struggle with this room, and much like I struggle with stuff like concrete steps in the back that people can't see. Do you want a safe route out of the building for people? Absolutely, but do you put that in front of critical equipment that, today people can't get their job done because they don't have the stuff? So, this one is a kind of a rub for me because I feel like this is kind of last.
Yeah, I tend to
Yeah.
agree with that to a certain extent, but also I think we need to consider the burden too on city staff in having to use the equipment and to do all of the back end stuff to make it work. Well, I don't care if I have to push these buttons or if I have to roll call vote. I do have concerns about our city clerk sitting here
Yeah.
and having to tabulate that information in a meaningful way.
Well, and it crashes in the middle and, we start
Yeah.
over sometimes and.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the voting stuff you have is it was actually not state of the art when it was done. Somebody hand wired that to a box that's underneath this corner right here. And then it has a serial cable that goes up to the PC. And someone wrote a VB program like 20 years ago to make it work. And
To figure out if the lights are red or
somehow,
green?
every time
Nice.
we replace that PC, our PC guy's like, I don't think I can get it to work again. I don't think I can get it to work again. And they always do.
I'm sure
I don't
it
know how
was
they
a-
do that. But Lisa, I would mention one concern I have, and I totally agree with you. And I think you're going to have a very challenging budget ahead of you. I don't want to discount that. The one risk we have is if that equipment dies, then we'll just have like, okay, I've got to replace at least the pieces of it that break. And so we do have some risk in that. Again, it's 20 years old.
Yeah,
So
no, agreed.
I don't disagree with your comment, though. I'd love to see, I want to make sure that the financial system gets replaced.
Well, that's just it. When, after hearing the presentation we had with your first item, then we come to, well, let's get the council new equipment, and
Yeah.
I would feel guilty taking new equipment in here knowing the other stuff wasn't fulfilled. That's
Yeah,
just.
we can, the voting side of it, we can put that in without replacing all the gear in the back here. That's what Marion and Leslie and I have talked a little bit about already. And actually, that is not very
And
expensive.
that's something that I'd want to watch for like savings on other projects, because so often we'll find that things come in under budget, or we'll have,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of a surplus that we could look at or something where,
Honestly, that project is, what was it, $6,000 or it's $9,000? It's not
well,
expensive.
and that's the stuff that, those are the
scheme of
numbers we
things.
want to hear. But that's where I would like rank something like that, just
Yeah.
because it
What
feels
that would
like
look like
it's.
is if we do that, I think the county's going to probably do it next month. I'm pretty sure that they've basically already told me to move forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's hosted in the cloud, and you set up the agendas. You set up how you want the votes done, and then all of you have to have your iPads here because we're going to run an app on your iPad
Mm-hmm.
where you vote on the iPad.
Okay, it's fine. And then we have one more, right? You have fleet management?
You have a hand up.
Yeah.
go ahead, Mike, sorry.
And I think Carol has some too, but I just had one quick thing. I know, probably when this voting system was developed, how many years ago I'm sure it was quite an elegant solution back then, but.
I'm not sure about that. When I got here, I'm looking at it, boy, that's pretty old school.
The thing I really wanted to speak to, though, is, we were talking about replacing the switches and the firewalls. And I know one of the big concerns, we see this on the news all the time, is, the malicious hacker attempts on municipalities and public organizations, hospitals and things like that. And when products go into life, they go into life for a reason. So will replacing this equipment ensure, and I'm not going to say, nothing's 100% safe, but is this going to keep us at a higher level of protection, when it comes to outside intrusions of our networks?
Of these, the only one that's really got a significant security component is the internet firewall piece. The switches, not really. Most of the cybersecurity spend that we do is inside of my operating budget. And we did a huge increase on that last year. I don't know if you guys remember when we did operating budget stuff, but I think, I don't remember the number. Carol, do you remember how much we increased from 20? Yeah, so we spent, I think we went from 130 spend on, I think we went from 130 spend on security in 2020 to a little over 200
Okay.
in 2021. We have a full-time security person now. One of our staff is been promoted and is getting extra training. So we also do stuff like we had a couple of pieces of software for security that we embedded into the city county IT operating budget. They weren't necessarily done as a CIP request. They were done as because of you're just licensed to use them, their operating cost stuff. And so we put in 2 or 3 new pieces of software in the last few months. There was one other thing I was going to cover. Shoot, I lost my train of thought on it. Sorry. But most of the cybersecurity stuff we're putting into our own. I remember now. We licensed like phishing testing. I don't know if you guys have seen any of those.
Oh, yeah.
So that's considered very good practice. You want to teach, one of the biggest risks we have is our employees causing a ransomware attack. And they do that by reading an email that is malicious, clicking on a link on it, or opening an attachment in it. And so about every 6 weeks, we run another campaign, and we send 2 or 3 emails that are phishing emails to all of our employees, including city council members. And if you click on something you're not supposed to click on, it says, congratulations, you're going to be taking cybersecurity training.
That's funny.
Yeah, and so
Nice.
it encourages you to watch a 3 or 4 minute video on how to identify stuff. We also have been teaching a class that's about 50 minutes long. We encourage everybody to take that once a year. That has where we explain cyber. We go into a little more detail on how to protect yourself. That class also explains. Has specific examples that we have. Great example of this is at North Central Healthcare. Michael Loy, who was the CEO there, you guys all know that name. Their payroll person received an email from Michael that said, "Hey, I'm changing banks. Please change my direct deposit for my payroll from this account at this bank to this account at this other bank." It was a phishing scam. The person caught it, but it's a beautiful example of how sophisticated these people are. They went onto the North Central Healthcare website. They figured out who was the CEO. They figured out who was the payroll person, got their 2 email addresses, faked Michael's email address.
Wow.
And sent it to him. The county had a similar thing with a vendor where someone faked a vendor, and they lost a few $100s. It was fortunately caught pretty quickly. That's what happened, if you remember, 2 years ago in Marshfield. They lost $600,000. The school district someone had a phishing scam that someone faked a vendor, but it was very intelligent. They went onto an open meeting request, and they figured out, okay, they need to make a payment to this construction company for this amount on this date. And then they contacted their accounts payable person and said, hey, we switched banks. So I don't remember who the vendor was, but let's say it was like a PJ Myron type person. They went into their meeting notes and figured out how much it was and who it was supposed to go to, and then faked that person. So they're getting very sophisticated. So that phishing training, I consider a critical component of our overall security.
Nice. Okay. And the last one we have is fleet management.
Yeah, I'm not going to probably spend any time on that because what we think we're going to end up doing is putting in Cartograph as part of the financial replacement system. I mentioned that earlier. And our current understanding, not exactly perfectly finalized yet, is Cartograph would potentially replace CFA, our fleet management inventory system.
Okay.
So I think that we're going to end up putting the Cartograph costs into the cost you see for the financial replacement.
So then that would take care of itself with the implementation.
That's what I think is
That-
going to happen.
That's huge, and I
I
think
just want to be
that's-
clear. I'm
Well,
not completely sure
it's-
yet.
It's huge from the standpoint that when you present to council, they are already aware, based on the Mercury study, that the current fleet management software is sadly inadequate. And so that's one thing that they and the SISM committee have looked at as a way to help fleet be a more efficient fleet. And if we can take care of that without a separate purchase, that's another added plus for your item
Yeah,
number one.
especially if that one can be used for a bunch of other stuff, right?
Right.
I mean, then you get an extra value out of it.
Right, so, yeah, and so, do you want us to even score that then at this point, if you believe it's integratable?
Mary Ann, what do you think?
I mean, you can, why don't you just go ahead and score, and then if we don't need to fund it.
We can always adjust the line
Yeah.
anyway, because that's the thing, everything we score can affect the scores of everything else, because they're an average,
Well,
so.
that was my question, just procedurally, because I've never done this before with scoring. How do you score something that's an unknown? Like, we're not sure what software you're gonna end up needing, because you're just finalizing those details. So how do you score some of this stuff if it's not concrete?
Well, like, I guess my thought would be if we were gonna try to score fleet management, not knowing yet whose product we would buy, we would score it based on a optimally performing product. So if we know that there's 3 or 4 products in the marketplace that meet their need, we would figure out, where we rank their need, and then if we score it such that it would qualify for appropriation, we would fund it, and they would choose the vendor and the product based on the confines of the money we gave them. So we're really not trying to score a specific, like an item, like a software package, but we're trying to score, do we need to upgrade this process?
Okay.
And then the other decisions would come later, like they would do an RFP and they would pick the right product, knowing how much
So
money
like
we've given.
kind of money aside.
Kind of, yes, like an earmark,
prioritize.
basically, yes.
Okay.
I think that's how we would do, when you don't know which vendor or which product, but you know you need one, we rank the need one, but not necessarily the
Because
specific.
that's where I'm struggling,
Yeah.
having this be my first time.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
it's filling the need, and then the specifics of filling the need, like with which type of product. The users often are involved in that, like with the law enforcement thing they talked about. They all did all the testing and picked their own product because they knew more than we knew. We just did the money part,
Okay.
so. But it's on the scoring side. Anything else? Does anyone else have
Do you
questions
do you want
for
any more background on what that system does?
the fleet management?
Yeah.
You could, yeah, why don't you give a little
Okay.
synopsis?
So we use a
Yes.
product called CFA right now, and that system keeps track of the inventory, so everybody's got cars. So if you replace you need to do oil changes and air filters, right, on your cars on a regular basis, and sometimes people keep a clipboard in their garage to say, hey, I changed the tires at 26,000, and I had an oil change at this. That system automates all of that stuff for you, so it keeps track of your inventory, and it keeps track of all the vehicles you have, when you did maintenance on them, PM work, when it's scheduled for, and so they can do stuff like run a report to say, which vehicles need an oil change this week? Okay, dump truck number 10 needs an oil change this week. The police department, these 5 cars need to get their tires rotated this week. And so it manages the inventory side of it and the PM side of it. Does some other stuff, but those are 2 of the big hitters.
Okay.
And it was identified in a report
In-
by
in
someone
the-
else that
yep.
the product that we have is not meeting their needs.
We hired a consultant to figure out all things fleet, like the facility, the logistics of how they inventory their parts and how they get their work done and how the chargebacks work. And that study identified that the software was subpar. So it's just on the council and they're, at least on the committee, and they're aware of that that's a
I
need.
think that stuff's been here since I got here too. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's pretty old stuff.
Yep. Anybody have questions on any of the IT stuff that Jerry and Marianne have talked about? If not, that will wrap up our presentations. There are a few things in our book that you'll see, like sections of the book that we don't score. So we don't score motor pool because it's self-funding through chargebacks. Same thing with park rolling stock. There's a replacement fund for that type of stuff. And streets and utilities actually have separate decision matrix, so we don't have to score those things. So you won't find score sheet. There's more in the book than there's on the score sheet, I guess. We discussed at the beginning of our session a little bit of how to work the score sheets. So Marianne is a fantastic resource for that. So if you guys have questions about, how to score a certain thing or how to, I guess, analyze the needs of this criteria, definitely give her a call or an email because she's certainly happy to help with that. She's been through it with us like forever, so that's helpful. Our next meeting is August 9th. And at that point, we want to give Emily some time to add up all of our individual scores and take an average. And so then what happens is she will list in order of rank how the projects stack up. And then there's usually a red line on that printout that shows where, at what point you run out of money. And so then, depending on where we're at with our, projects that we know we have to prioritize, we can move projects above and below that line to get the mix we need, and then that product goes to finance. So, yesterday, I think, after we adjourned, we had just a quick discussion with Emily about the need to try and turn in those score packets by August 1st. That would give her a week to tabulate what she needs, and then prepare for the 9th of August. So, does anyone have questions on scoring or on timeline at all?
Can we get the score sheets in like a spreadsheet format? Sure. That would make my life a little easier, because then I don't have to scan the pages and email them back.
Yeah.
So,
That's
Okay.
nice for us too, because then we can just add them up on the.
yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
I actually always start out this way with pencil, because I find that I change my mind enough that there's a lot of erasure on mine and re-adding, so.
Yeah, and I think if they were sheets, then it'd be easy to kind of.
Well, exactly.
Mumble the
exactly.
numbers
So,
around.
At least this is for my scratch paper part, where, once I have my mind made up, I could enter them in a spreadsheet for you. So with that, we're a little over on time today, but we got through them all. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Martin, second by Marl. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We'll stand adjourned then, and we will see everybody on August 9th. And the score sheets can be either faxed, emailed, or dropped off for Emily. So, thanks, everyone.